Hello and welcome back to On the Grid Podcast, Season 5, Episode 9. And we are back for the first time in what feels like forever with a Grand Prix review. So it's the Australian Grand Prix last weekend, and we are here to review it, to talk about it, give our driver ratings, then look ahead to China this coming weekend. Joining with me as ever is Adrian Keita. How are you today? What do you think of the race?
Um, the race was a crazy one, because I had the idea of, you know what, I'm going to stay up the whole time, up until 4 o'clock in the morning to try and watch the race, which initially I did successfully. I stayed up till 4 o'clock, but then Mr. Hajar binned it. So the formation lap got aborted and the race start got aborted. So I had to wait another 15 minutes. And I can vividly remember watching the first 5 laps. After that, I fell asleep and woke up to about 5 laps left in the race. With I believe it was Lando leading from Max, from a safety car restart after I think, was the last retirements Lawson and Bortoletto, I think those two binned it. And I can remember waking up to obviously the safety car peeling in, and that fiasco happening. But I did catch the highlights. It wasn't really that much of an eventful race if you think about it. I think the weather played a few tricks with strategy, Ferrari. Um, but yeah, from a Ferrari perspective, it was a shocking race. But overall, I think it was a little bit lackluster. I mean, all the rookies pretty much, apart from Behrman, who finished pretty much last, and Antonelli, they had a disaster class. But apart from that, I don't think much happened. I don't think there was that much entertainment. But I think once we dissect it, I think it will show us a completely different complexion of a race. But enough of my waffle. Let's get on to the review.
So I didn't wake up for the race. Sky showed a full race replay. I think it was about 7:30. So I woke up for that one. I didn't decide to stay up until 4 a.m. because I don't think I would have been able to do it, and I definitely wouldn't be able to wake up for 4 a.m. If we crack on with then qualifying first of all, so out in Q1 from 16th to 20th was Kimi Antonelli, Hulkenberg, Lawson, Ocon, and Behrman. It was quite surprising was that Gabriel Bortoleto outqualified Nico Hulkenberg, who for the last year we've been praising as this fantastic driver who excels in qualifying, and then he got outqualified by Bortoleto on his debut. What do you make of that?
You can't really make a lot out of it. It's both of the drivers' first kind of appearances in the Sauber in qualifying conditions, and I think both of them are getting used to the car in their own respective kind of ways. Yeah, we talked about Nico Hulkenberg kind of nailing down qualifying, but as we look further into the weekend, it might be the complete opposite. It might be a complete disaster class in qualifying from him, but the race trim and the race spec from the Sauber car could help him in the races. So it could be complete roles reversed from his time at Haas to his time in Sauber now, where his qualifyings are going to be kind of lackluster and his races are going to be fantastic. But then again, it's only one race, and I don't think we can judge him upon one poor qualifying session. It is shocking, don't get me wrong, because we know him as a kind of a qualifying specialist. But you can't write him off after one race. I mean, if this happens on a continuation basis on every race or every other race where he's out qualified by his teammate and knocked out in Q1, then fair enough. But from one race, I don't think you can really judge him upon a poor qualifying session.
One of the big stories from Q1 was the fact that you had two drivers from big teams actually getting knocked out in Antonelli and Lawson. Antonelli looked like he had a massive amount of damage. There was a lot of sparks coming from underneath the car, and apparently it cost him half a second a lap. So that you could say is a big reason. But for Lawson, it's not a good start at all, is it? He's not had the first weekend he'd hoped for. So close to home as well, obviously being from New Zealand.
Yeah. It's I really don't know how to put into perspective with Liam Lawson because we've seen it with every single driver that's kind of been alongside Max Verstappen, where whether it's Pierre Gasly, whether it's Alex Albon, whether it's been Sergio Perez, and I think Liam Lawson will fall foul to it. That second car is basically Max Verstappen spec. It's down to the Red Bull car. They line it up to how Max Verstappen drives. It's I believe I heard it on one of the podcasts talking about the Australian Grand Prix actually. And I listened into it and I was just very like, yeah, it's everybody knows this. It's nailed down to a T that the second car is always going to be the tricky car to kind of get a handle because that team is playing to Max Verstappen's strengths. They're not going to play to Liam Lawson's strengths. He's the rookie in the situation. They're going to be playing to a four-time world champion who's looking for his fifth on the bounce, may I add. They're not gonna downplay it. It's kind of obvious and it's kind of clear to see that that team is technically Max Verstappen racing. It is, and it's always going to be hard for Liam Lawson to match anything that Max Verstappen does. It's unlucky that he got himself knocked out, similarly to Kimi Antonelli, that kind of two rookies in top teams in Mercedes and Red Bull got themselves knocked out in Q1. But I think both of them are also going to be learning the ropes in the top team. Kimi Antonelli, obviously, his rookie season in a top team, and Liam Lawson's obviously been at the sister team, AlphaTauri and RB. So it's obviously going to be tricky for the two of them. But it'll only improve, I believe, race by race, and once they kind of get to grips with the car and with the demands of being in a top team.
Yeah, so in Q1, Norris was quickest from Russell, and then Lewis Hamilton had a bit of a scare, but left it late, but ended up in P6. Moving on to Q2, and knocked out from 11th to 15th was Isaac Hadjar, Alonso, Stroll, Doohan, and Bortoleto. Not many surprises, I don't think. Obviously, Hadjar had a fantastic qualifying session, only just missed out on Q2, and it was actually a Lewis Hamilton spin at the end, which may have saved him and may have secured a position in Q3 because it ruined a couple of laps. I know that, but Norris was quickest from Piastri and Verstappen in that one. And then moving on to Q3, a McLaren 1-2 with Norris leading Piastri, Verstappen in third, George Russell in fourth, and then the big shocks, Yuki Tsunoda and Alex Albon lining up on the third row and fifth and sixth. North Ferrari, fourth row, Leclerc and Hamilton, and then Gasly and Sainz rounding off the top 10. Let's take a moment to talk about Tsunoda and Albon. Brilliant stuff from the both of them. Really stepped up when it mattered, especially Alex Albon, when you think that all the talk was how well Carlos Sainz is going to do. I think he was a little bit disrespected in that sense, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. Obviously, Alex Albon's season last term wasn't what people had expected, and I don't think it was what we expected. I think when we did our season predictions review, we both had him quite high up, and his expectation he didn't really he went quite under the radar. He was quite it was quite a lackluster season for him in 2024. But in 2025, he's hit the ground running by the seams of things because I think due to the nature of him having such a experienced and such a talented teammate in Carlos Sainz, he's having to step up himself. But I think Williams, in their own respects, I think they are slowly starting a redemption arc. I think a lot of people on F1 Facebook, F1 Twitter, F1 TikTok are rating both the pair very, very highly. And we did as well when we did our driver pairings kind of ratings. So Alex Albon has to kind of step up a level because of his teammate. And I think in regards to Yuki Tsunoda, he's having to step up a little bit because Isaac Hadjar, yes, he qualified in P11, but I don't think he'll be a pushover. You obviously looking at your rookies. You've got Gabriel Bortoleto, who's against an experienced Nico Hulkenberg. You've got Ollie Behrman, who's obviously up against a quite experienced Esteban Ocon. I think the two, obviously Yuki Tsunoda and Isaac Hadjar, they're quite. I wouldn't say they're more closely. They're more close within kind of their ages and quite and their experience. So I reckon those two will push each other a lot when it comes to qualifying and races. So it'll only benefit them a lot. But honestly, Alex Albon and Yuki Tsunoda, when I saw him qualify fifth and sixth, honestly, a lot of praise. And for them to qualify ahead of the two Ferraris who had so much hype behind them going into the season opener, it just shows you that anything can happen in this sport. And there are completely different. There are a lot of variables uh, in F1, especially in qualifying, that make the sport so exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So Verstappen was on provisional pole, but then fantastic efforts from both McLarens after they struggled. I think they were sixth and tenth after the first runs. But what's striking is the fact that I think they were half a second clear of the entire field in that last sector. So a massive effort from the two of them to secure the front row and with two storming laps. If we move on then to our driver ratings, so we'll kick things off with the pole setter, Lando Norris. So qualified in first and finished first, and it is quite easily a 10 out of 10 for me. I think he managed the pace really, really well. We was put under a lot of pressure from Verstappen and Piastri, but held firm, dealt with all of the restarts brilliantly. I do just want to say, Martin Brundle at the end said that is one of the all-time Formula One drives. I think that might be taking it a little bit far. I didn't agree that he was driver of the day. He was certainly a very, very strong race. To actually get his first time winning back-to-back races, obviously winning in Abu Dhabi last season. But I think one of the all-time drives and driver of the day was a little bit far, but it's a 10 out of 10 performance nonetheless.
Yeah, I agree with you. Lando Norris, obviously a 10 out of 10 for finally not bottling pole position and finally converting it to a race victory, may I add, and breaking Max Verstappen's uh, kind of championship leading form. I believe Verstappen led the championship for over 1,000 days, if I'm not mistaken. I think I saw a stat on F1. Um, and it's the first time that Lando Norris is leading the championship. So an all-time drive, I don't think so. Driver of the day, I don't think so. I think there's more shouts of Antonelli or even Albon getting the nods for driver of the day. But it's a 10 out of 10 regardless. He could like you mentioned, he kind of fended off the threats from Piastri and from Verstappen. Verstappen made a mistake which saw Piastri go through. Obviously, the two McLarens did have a moment when the rain came out again in the dying stages, going off the track. But obviously, Lando held firm whilst Oscar kind of skidded off and stuck it in the grass. But yeah, it's a 10 out of 10 regardless. It's a great drive to start off the season. Back-to-back victories for Lando Norris, and I think Lando Norris certainly has shown now capabilities from the opening race of the season that I think he can challenge for the title. He has the car. He's hopefully learned from the mistakes of last year, and hopefully he can push on and get a few more victories at the start of the season, like Max Verstappen did, and kind of wrap up a championship quite early on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was going to go right down to the wire from the seams of it, and I think that is a real statement victory in the first race of the season when there was a lot of pressure on him. So yeah, fantastic result. It's definitely a 10 out of 10. Next up, Max Verstappen qualified in third and finished second. I've gone for a 9 out of 10. I thought it was a very, very strong performance, especially when you consider the fact that I think it was very clear that the McLaren was a quicker car, much quicker as well. So to finish second in the way that he did is a great performance. I'm definitely regretting putting him so far down in my driver rankings for the season. I don't know what I was thinking. I think I was a little bit rushed, as I said in the podcast, and wasn't quite happy with a few of my driver placements. But anyway, brilliant start to the season for Verstappen. Obviously, he loses his streak of leading the championship for so many days. I think that's the record now. I think it overtook Michael Schumacher's record last season. I could be mistaken. But a very, very good drive, and he proved why he's a four-time world champion.
Yeah, so I went point five higher than you. I settled with a 9.5 out of 10 as I like to. Obviously I think the mistake that he made whilst trying to challenge Norris kind of hampered him a little bit midway through the race, but then he was able to pass Piastri 4 second when he binned it when the rain came out. Obviously, I think if I'm not mistaken, Red Bull made the first call to pit him, and I think it was the right call. I still think that obviously Verstappen had nowhere near the pace of a McLaren to challenge for a win, but he was on the coattails of Lando Norris throughout most of that race. But still, pretty much a very statement second place for him. Obviously, like I mentioned, didn't have what it takes to get the race victory. But his starts are so good. Honestly, he could have been in the lead if it wasn't for Lando Norris closing the door on him. Because his race starts, he nails them down to a T, and I think that kind of enables him to be differentiated from the two McLaren drivers. His ability to nail race starts and get into the lead of a race in the opening lap is what's been crucial to his four world championships so far. But it was a very very good second place, just inches off a race victory, but still a very very good performance from Max.
Oscar Piastri up next. Obviously, sorry, no, George Russell is next, isn't he? He qualified in fourth and finished third. I've gone for a 9 out of 10 for George Russell. A very, very good drive. Perhaps a little bit quiet at times. I don't think he was particularly focused on. I think he was driving a very solid race in a world of his own almost. Looks set to get a very comfortable P4 without challenging the top three. But then obviously with what happened to Piastri, he went off and ended up a lap down. He took third place and was very comfortable. Obviously, Antonelli closed a lot at the end and was only a second and a half behind him. But I do think that's partly down to the fact that Antonelli had that 5 second penalty and Russell was kind of cruising more than anything. So very good start to the season. He's shown he can deliver as a team leader. So good start for Russell, good start for Mercedes, and it's 9 out of 10 from me.
Yep, I'm inclined to agree with you on a 9 out of 10 for George Russell. I think he was sort of in a world of his own. Let's put it that way, because I think the leading three of Norris, Verstappen, and Piastri, up until Piastri's spin and the rain came out, were in a league of their own, and Russell was just kind of cruising along and forth. But he kind of benefited from what happened to Piastri and the rain coming out, and gained a more of a noteworthy podium finish. And it's like you mentioned, it's another statement for George Russell, showing that he can be a team leader, and that he can deliver when it matters most. And it's another set of valuable points for Mercedes, because they finished third and fourth, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're level with McLaren in the Constructors' Championship. So yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, George Russell, a very noteworthy drive, but definitely not as noteworthy as his rookie teammate coming up next.
Yeah, speaking of him, we're going to get onto him now. So Kimi Antonelli obviously qualified in 16th and finished fourth. And this is my driver of the day. I think this guy is absolute dynamite. I do think there's going to be a number of races where he puts it in the wall, but it's because he is wrestling it to the extreme. He is trying to get every ounce of performance. Look at the overtake he done on Alex Albon towards the end. It was absolutely fantastic. He got a 5 second penalty, which was correctly overturned. So had his fourth place reinstated, and you can't really have a much better first race than he did. I think there's only four rookies in their first race who have got a higher finish than Antonelli. So he joins some esteemed company there. And I think he's the second youngest point scorer behind Max Verstappen. So it's 10 out of 10 all day long. Argue with the wall if you disagree. Sensational performance.
Okay, I'm just going to turn my camera and I'm going to argue with that wall as to why it definitely was a 10 out of 10 for Kimi Antonelli. And yeah, like I mentioned, a deserved driver of the day. I don't care what anybody thinks about Lando Norris's drive. The man's gained 12 positions from his race start position, finished fourth, and on his debut, I believe it's only. I'm trying to think because I saw the stat again. I'm going to refer to F1. I believe it's only Jacques Villeneuve, Kevin Magnussen, and I want to say Lewis Hamilton that have finished higher than him on their race debuts, and Antonelli obviously fourth on that list with a fourth place finish. But he was the driver of the day, not Lando Norris. Kimi Antonelli was the driver of the day because on your rookie debut, yes, okay, he's in a Mercedes car and he starts P16. It's not what anybody would have wanted from Kimi Antonelli, but to storm through the field with a numerous amount of spins, and then finished in P4, top five finish, and obviously one place behind your teammate is exactly what the team wanted. The points aren't paid on the Saturday, they're paid on the Sunday, and he did what he needed to do the most, get the points that he needed for the team, and now they're joint top in the Constructors' Championship. So all in all is good. Kimi Antonelli, fantastic drive for your debut race. Only way is upwards now for Kimi Antonelli. I think that he's shown that he can do it on race day, but it just depends on whether he can combine qualifying and the race. And I think once he combines that together, he's going to be one hell of a driver.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be one to watch, isn't he? Moving on then to fifth place, and that is Alex Albon. So he qualified in sixth and finished fifth. Was it obviously fourth on track because of that 5 second penalty that was applied to Antonelli, but that got reversed. So he ended up with P5. And again, it's a 10 out of 10. So third 10 out of 10 from the top five. That's not bad going at all, is it? Sensational performance. Like we said in the qualifying part, there was a lot of pressure on him coming into this season because you got Carlos Sainz coming into the team. All the talk was about how he's going to elevate the team, how he's going to set the standard and fight. Even us in our driver predictions had sights a lot higher than Albon. And Albon has taken a lot of criticism and he's come back and he's delivered a fifth place finish in the first race. I think he's actually got close to the however many points he got last season. I think Williams ended up with 17 points. I'm not sure how many of those were Albons. I imagine it would be about 10, 11, 12. So he's almost matched his points tally from last season, which is fantastic. Yeah, I don't really have much else to say. He obviously defended very, very well against Lewis Hamilton. Kept him at bay for a large portion of this race. And then it was only sort of a last minute move at the end from Antonelli that earned him fourth place and relegated Albon to fifth place. So 10 out of 10, you can't say any more.
Yep, and I'm inclined to agree with you again. We've given yet another 10 out of 10. These driver rating graphics are going to be very simple for the opening race of the season because there's going to be about 16 different drivers level on 10 out of 10s. 16 is an exaggeration, by the way. But yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you because Alex Albon, yet again, obviously the Williams car is still undergoing kind of a rejuvenation, if you want to say, because they've not been themselves since the days of Valtteri Bottas, which is like what, 2015, 2016, I want to say. And it's been quite a while since they've kind of hit the heights of their championship seasons from back in the 90s. But I think they're slowly starting to pick up their form. And Alex Albon has shown that when Carlos Sainz is not there, he's more than happy to pick up the baton and do what he can do best, which is score a lot of points for the team, and I think he's shown that his experience and kind of his know-how, and even though he may not be seen as a team leader, I think within the team he is a team leader, especially with the amount of years that he's now spent at Williams. So, like you mentioned, I don't think I could add more onto what Alex Albon has done because he's scored a large chunk of what the team scored last season in one race. It goes without saying that Alex Albon should not be slept on, and that he is definitely a driver that will be challenging Carlos Sainz. And kind of they're another team that will be pushing each other a long way and hopefully in the right direction, that is.
Next up, Lance Stroll qualified in 13th and finished 6th. I've gone for an 8 out of 10. Obviously, we've criticised this man a lot. I think the biggest compliment I can say is that he was in the right place at the right time. I think by keeping it tidy, by having a good strategy, and keeping it out of the wool, he's actually ended up with a very, very good point scoring position, whereas a lot of drivers and teams messed up their strategy, messed up, crashing into the wall, including this teammate, because he was actually running outside of the points for much of the race. Um, so an 8 out of 10, a good start to the season. You can't really say anything else.
You know what? We've criticised Lance Stroll a lot, and yeah, I'm gonna overrule you. I've gone one higher. I've given him a 9. And I think it's purely down to obviously he's finished just outside the top five, and his more experienced teammate in Fernando Alonso is obviously DNF'd, alongside most of the other rookies. But we give Lance Stroll a lot of slack, and I don't think he deserved it after the opening race in Australia. I think he performed very well. He was running quite high. And then he's obviously benefited from some of the retirements, but you have to be there in the right time at the right time to benefit from kind of these retirements. And he was there at the right time to benefit from what had happened to the people in front of him. So to finish P6 in a race of chaos and a race of crashes and rain, etc. He's done a good job, and I don't think I can fault him too much. He's not made any mistakes, and he's managed to keep it away from the barriers and on the track. So I've settled with a 9 out of 10 for Lance Stroll.
Nico Hulkenberg next. I almost said Kevin Magnussen. It was a force of habit, obviously, two harsh drivers from last season. Nico Hulkenberg is next. He qualified in 17th and finished 7th, and it's another 10 out of 10. You can't say anything else. It was an unbelievable performance. The fact that Sauber already have more points than they did last season from the first race, I think it goes to show the experience and the leadership and the elevation that Nico Hulkenberg and a driver of his standard will bring to this team. He's well suited to driving in the midfield and to developing cars and to making sure they're right at the top of that midfield. And I think he'll bring a whole host of experience to this Sauber team, and can really, really help them out. So that's why I've gone for a 10 out of 10. It was an excellent performance. And like I said, more points than Sauber got last season in the first race.
Yeah, again, another driver that we agree on, Nico Hulkenberg, 10 out of 10 performance. And yeah, like you mentioned, Nico Hulkenberg has delivered more points for Sauber than Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu did the whole of last season. And I think um, he's another driver that will be biting our tongue after the last race of the season because if people watched our season predictions, we've predicted Sauber down very, very low. And don't get me wrong, there's a long way to go until the end of the season, but I think the driver of Nico Hulkenberg's caliber won't go down without a fight. So he's already proved that in the first race of the season, gaining 10 positions from his starting position in 17th to finish 7th. Um, and if this race is anything to go by, and he continues in this vein with qualifying poorly and end up finishing him inside the top 10, he's going to get a whole host of points. And he's only going to help Gabriel Bortoleto improve along the way. So, yeah, 10 out of 10. He's definitely another one to watch out because even though he's downgraded in quotation marks this season, it might be an upgrade next season, but it kind of looks like a downgrade this season. He's still, I think, one to watch out for the whole season.
Charles Leclerc next, qualified in seventh and finished eighth. I've got to give him a 7 out of 10. I think Ferrari's strategy has absolutely hindered him. Surprise. He made up two positions at the start, which really helped his race. And I think without those safety cars and without sort of the changeable conditions, he finishes a comfortable P5, realistically, doesn't he? Because I think he was well clear of Sonoda, Albon, like I said, and then he was some way behind George Russell as well. Obviously made a mistake as well, which put him behind Sonoda, Albon, and Hamilton, I believe, just as the rain was beginning after they'd switched over to the dries. But then I don't know what Ferrari are playing at. And now we can both share this pain, as we'll get onto in a minute. But shocking strategy from Ferrari, and I've got to give him a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, welcome to the club, mate. Of sharing pain because of Ferrari strategy. Clowns, absolute clowns. Decided to keep both of Ferraris out when they knew, you know what? We'll tell our drivers that rain is on the way. Oh, let's pit him when it's too late. Yeah, good idea. Fantastic strategy, Ferrari. Well done. I've also gone with a 7 out of 10. Like you mentioned, he obviously made those places up at the start. He had a fantastic start. But because of the safety cars and the Ferrari strategy, he literally did next to nothing. And because of that, he finished in eighth. And because of that, he's crying in the media because of the strategy and having a poor weekend. But I'm sure China will be completely different if Ferrari don't watch his strategy once again. It's what will be costing Charles Leclerc a championship. If we look back on this season and he finishes second or third, we're going to look at Ferrari's strategy. Everyone will. Everyone does because it's what's hampered Ferrari in the last couple of seasons. Strategy. Why can't they just be a normal team where they're not getting strategies from clowns and from people working in a circus? Why? I'm still gobsmacked, but yeah, I've gone with a 7 out of 10 without me going absolutely insane and pulling my hair out.
Oscar Piastri next, qualified in second and finished ninth. I've gone for a 7 out of 10 because I think he is so unlucky. He done the exact same thing that Lando Norris did. It's just that the grass was so wet that he ended up spinning out again and Lando Norris didn't. It's such fine margins. It could have been the other way around and Oscar Piastri wins this race and Lando Norris ends up ninth, but it wasn't. I think he showed brilliant temperament to actually get out of that situation, though. Got a bit of fortune with the safety car that followed, able to unlap himself and then managed to get 2 points, which will be some sort of a silver lining. I do think these two are going to go hammer and tong for the title. So maybe you never know. Maybe these 2 points will actually come back and actually save him and give him a better chance. But as it is, I'm sure he'll be very disappointed. He should have been standing on the podium and he probably would have been getting a 9 or a 10 if he had been. But as it is, I can't give him any higher than a 7. I think he'll just be glad that there's another race coming up this weekend.
Yeah, and once again, we agree on another driver rating. I've given Oscar Piastri a 7 out of 10. And yes, it is fine margins that Lando Norris was able to kind of go on the grass and drive off into the distance whilst Oscar Piastri seemed to pretty much beach it, which you don't expect on the grass, but because the grass was so slippery, he just couldn't get going and had to find reverse gear to get himself back into the race. But after he found the reverse gear, he was pretty much out of contention for a top five finish. It's very unlucky, but like you mentioned, there's a race this weekend coming. Oscar Piastri hopefully can sort of snap out of it and deliver a podium finish in the sprint and potentially in the race. But like you mentioned, very, very fine margins. Just Oscar Piastri was on the wrong end of it, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. Next up is Lewis Hamilton, qualified in eighth and finished 10th. I've gone for a 6 out of 10 for Lewis Hamilton. Got to give him a mark lower than Leclerc. I can't give him the same mark, but I do think a lot of his troubles weren't necessarily down to him. I think if they pit when they should have pit, he probably finishes a solid sort of P6, P7 because you got to think he's going to finish above Stroll and Hulkenberg. They were miles behind him on the track, so he's got to finish sixth or seventh roughly. As it is, he's only just scraped points, and that was actually only because Gasly locked up and went over to the grass and lost a couple of positions to both him and Leclerc. Disappointing start to his Ferrari career. I'm sure that's how we'll be feeling. But let's see what happens in the dry conditions in China because I think for much of the race he was frustrated behind Albon because he just couldn't make the overtake without DRS, without any of these assistants. So it was somewhat harder to make the overtake stick.
Yep, I agree as well. I've gone with a 6 out of 10 for Lewis Hamilton, but it's just disappointing. I think both Ferraris were disappointing in this race, and it's probably down to the conditions and also the strategy. I think both of them are in the same boat. Uh, in this race, it was just a bit of a disaster class when it came to everything regarding Ferrari. And without saying any explicitives and without swearing or without any of that sort of stuff. It was just a disaster. Lewis Hamilton's debut race at Ferrari gets 1 point. It's a shrug of the shoulders from me, and I think it's a shrug of the shoulders from every Ferrari fan uh, around the world. It was just what it was, and he couldn't have done much. The strategy and the weather played a large part of him just securing 1 point in Australia.
Moving outside to the non-point scoring places. First up is Pierre Gasly, qualified in ninth and finished 11th. I've gone for a 6 out of 10. He was running in ninth for much of the race, but it's his mistake that's cost him points at the end of the day, isn't it? So I think it would be difficult for either of the Ferraris to overtake him without DRS, or sorry, without that mistake, because DRS wasn't enabled at the end there. So a disappointing one for Gasly, especially when you consider the Alpine looked fairly strong. It looked like it could have got points, and also only four cars finished outside the points. Only four cars that finished didn't score points, and two of them were the Haas's, we will get onto in a minute, but they were miles off the pace. So I'm sure Gasly would be very disappointed about this, especially because he was running in the points for the majority of the race.
Yeah, so for Pierre Gasly, I've actually gone for a 7 out of 10. I think his qualifying and his kind of race performance were of a good standard. It's just that moment where he locked up and kind of lost the two places to the two Ferraris, which saw him drop out of the side of the points, and obviously Oscar Piastri overtook him as well near the end. But it will be disappointed because from where Alpine were at the start of last season to where they are now, it's a completely different team, and they look strong. They obviously made them. Gasly made his way into Q3. Doohan made his way into Q2. So all is not lost at Alpine. It's just fine margins again. We use that phrase, fine margins. It was the same with Piastri, and it was the same with Pierre Gasly. Obviously, two of them made a mistake and had to pay for it. Oscar obviously finishing on the brink of the points, on inside the points, but in ninth, and Pierre Gasly finishing just outside the points. So it's fine margins, but yet again, the weather played a large hand in what happened with the two drivers, and Pierre Gasly will be disappointed, but I think heartened by what the Alpine can do, and where the Alpine can progress from this race. But hopefully, similarly to Hamilton, the only way is up for Alpine, and hopefully Gasly will find that in China, and he's hopeful to sort of reset and get himself back up into the points again.
Yuki Tsunoda now qualified in fifth and finished 12th. Again, this is one that is so frustrating because it's through no fault of his own. He was running in sixth for pretty much the entire race. And then RB decided to do whatever they did with the strategy, and absolutely throw that away. Instead of playing it safe, and going with the odds, they decided to roll the dice and it completely backfired. And Sonoda ended up 12th. Again, like I said, only four cars finished outside the points that actually finished the race. So massively disappointing. But I've gone for an 8 out of 10 for Yuki Tsunoda because his performance was absolutely flawless. And it would have been I think realistically, if he got the result he deserved, it probably would have been a 10 out of 10. But unfortunately, he's lost about 7 or 8 places through no fault of his own.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. I've gone one lower. I've given him a 7. I've given him a similar grade to what I did with Pierre Gasly. I think Yuki Tsunoda's qualifying. I think nobody expected that at the start. To qualify in P5 in an RB, it just shows the kind of levels that Yuki Tsunoda kind of came with to Australia. Obviously, finishing outside the points is bitterly disappointing for him. He would have hoped to finish at least at least P6 if you're looking where Albon finished in P5. Um, but he will be bitterly disappointed. And he's another driver that, similarly to Pierre Gasly, will be looking at will be looking at China for a way to bounce back and get himself some much needed points because from his qualifying performance, he was thinking he only had points on his mind and a lot of them. But obviously he wasn't able to finish inside the points and finished in P12. So it's very unlucky for him, but shows signs of intent for Yuki Tsunoda in sort of yet again, I'll mention it because we mentioned it for Yuki Tsunoda in a sort of make or break season for him. It's been a make or break season for him for the last 2 3 years, but I think this one may finally be the make or break one.
The next two drivers, the two harsh drivers, Esteban Ocon and Ollie Bearman, I'm going to clump them together because I'm going to give them the same grade. So Ocon qualified 19th, finished 13th. Bearman qualified 20th, finished 14th. I've gone for a 5 out of 10 for both of them. I'm not going to give them any lower because I've got drivers that retired who I've given a 4 out of 10. So I can't do that, but I can't give them any higher because they were absolutely anonymous. They were miles off the pace. And then yet again, another harsh strategy disaster class, and they decided to stick it out on the inters, and then under the safety car, a lap before the rain was starting to come, they decided to put the mediums on, which almost ended up in them getting lapped again. Completely botched the strategy and didn't give their drivers a chance. You got to go one way or the other. You got to be decisive, and Haas just weren't. So 5 out of 10 is for the pair of them.
Yeah, not much more to add on your points. I've also given them both 5 out of 10s. Very anonymous. And I think I'm hoping that they're not reversing to what happened in 2023, where they were completely nowhere. Uh, Actually, funnily enough, I did see a lot of Facebook posts and stuff regarding Haas's performance and them kind of clowning them that they've reversed their car. They've reversed the 2025 car to the 2023 car, where they were absolutely nowhere. And whether that's the case, we don't know. It's obviously the opening race of the season, but for Ollie Behrman's sake, with his potential and Esteban Ocon's sake, with kind of his experience and know-how, I hope that's not the case. But for this race, it's very anonymous. Both 5 out of 10 performances.
The first of the retirees up next, and it's Liam Lawson. He qualified in 18th and did not finish. I've gone for a 3 out of 10. A mighty disappointing weekend for Liam Lawson. Made his own mistake and crashed. But the reason it's a 3 and some of the others are going to be a 4 is the fact that he's in the Red Bull. He only qualified 18th. I know he's still getting to grips with the car, but he should be doing better. Should be getting into Q2 at the very least. And it didn't really make strides. There was one point where he was up in sixth, which is I think around the time he binned it, but he that was through sheer luck when some of the other cars messed up the strategy and whatnot, or I think he stayed out for a lap longer as well. So it was temperamental and not actually indicative of his pace. He was running third to last for the majority of the race, above the two above the two Haas's, but no pace whatsoever. I think he was lapping 3 seconds a lap slower than Verstappen most of the time. So very disappointing start to his Red Bull career for Liam Lawson.
For Liam Lawson, I've gone with a 4 out of 10. I think that yes, the points you mentioned is obviously a bitterly disappointing weekend for him. It's something that we were not expecting. We were expecting to kind of hit the ground running and kind of nail nail his kind of place at Red Bull with a good start to his career. But it's the complete opposite. He's binned it by himself, and he's retired from his debut race at Red Bull. But I think it's a little bit of injustice on Liam Lawson because I believe it was Helmut Marko that stated that, or it might have been Christian Horner that stated that obviously a lot of these drivers have experienced Melbourne and Albert Park before, and Liam Lawson it was actually one of the drivers that hadn't. And okay, that's completely fine, and I understand that. But in a Red Bull car, like you mentioned, he should be doing it a little bit better in qualifying and at least getting himself through to Q2. But the race, he made a mistake by himself and crashed out. So yeah, 4 out of 10, very poor debut showing in Red Bull for Liam Lawson.
Gabriel Bortoleto up next. He qualified in 15th and didn't finish. I've gone for a 4 out of 10 for him. I thought it was an impressive qualifying performance. As we said, I think it could have been better had he not made a small mistake. And I think the Hamilton spin as well cost him. Did not finish. Disappointed again to lose it in the way he did. He was running in a decent place for most of the race. And I think he probably would have finished in the points had he not retired, given everything that happened around him. But I think there's a lot of positives to take for Bortoleto. So a 4 out of 10 from me.
Yeah, agreed. I've also gone with a 4 out of 10 for Gabriel Bortoleto, and I think all of these rookies kind of can sort of be grouped because it's very tricky driving your opening race in your Formula One career on a damp racetrack when you've never experienced that before. And Bortoleto, Doohan, and Hadjar obviously experienced all the same. Alonso and Sainz, you probably can't say the same about them being so experienced. But Gabriel Bortoleto obviously qualifying in Q2 is a step in the right direction. And qualifying your teammate is a very big step in the right direction. Obviously, retiring is two steps back. But there's plenty of positives for him to take. He's obviously shown tremendous pace in qualifying, and the race was very relatively good for him. But he's obviously not going to reach the heights of Nico Hulkenberg straight away. Let's be real. And he's obviously going to take time for him to adapt to Sauber. But it's promising. It's promising signs. But unfortunately, he retired from a race, so I don't think we can give him a higher rating, a more high rating than a 4 out of 10.
Uh, Fernando Alonso next qualified in 12th and did not finish. So he was running in 10th place, I think, for a lot of the race. And I think it was actually Gasly running over some gravel, which caused some gravel to be placed on the racing line, and then that was what caused Alonso's crash. Yeah, I've gone for a 3 out of 10 because I don't think he should be making that sort of mistake, even if there was mitigating circumstances. An uncharacteristic error from Alonso, I think it's fair to say. So I've gone for a 3 out of 10.
The only thing is, you do have to point out he's a rookie, so of course he's going to make mistakes like this. Let's be real. He's a fantastic talent, but you're forgetting he's a rookie, Ethan.
Absolutely. I changed my grade. I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm inclined to agree. I've also gone with a 3 out of 10 because, yes, he was running pretty much inside the points. But yeah, you shouldn't be. Uh, with so much experience under your belt, you shouldn't be making mistakes like that. It's very bizarre that he made a mistake like that and binned it, heading obviously down the straight into the chicane. But I think everybody was surprised with what happened to Fernando Alonso because, like we mentioned, he was running up inside the points and then he bins it, and then points are gone. But I think Lance Stroll benefited from that tremendously, and he's obviously reaped the rewards of Alonso crashing, and he finished sixth. So obviously Alonso will be disappointed. Stroll will be very happy. But obviously the grade remains the same for Fernando Alonso. You shouldn't be making so silly errors, especially with the experience you have under your belt. So it's a 3 out of 10.
Carlos Sainz next, qualified in 10th and did not finish. I've gone for a 3 out of 10 as well. I think a driver of his experience, again, shouldn't be making that sort of mistake. I know he said it was down to the way it upshifted under the safety car mode. But I still think that's something so silly to ruin your race over, especially in these conditions. You have Carlos Sainz as maybe a driver who could excel. So a disappointing day for Sainz, but apparently he did help out a lot with the strategy for Albon. I'm not going to give him an extra point for that in this though. 3 out of 10.
I've gone with a 4 out of 10 for Carlos Sainz. I think you can only really judge him upon his qualifying performance. And yes, he did qualify um, behind Alex Albon. But I think the positive for Williams is that both their cars managed to qualify for Q3. Um, Obviously, one retired from a race with what was an upshift for Carlos Sainz, and he kind of binned it. Um, but I think that there's positives for Carlos Sainz, and yes, he's made a bit of a mistake, he's made a bit of an upsie, but it's only the first race of the season. It's hopefully not going to happen in every single race this season. Um, Obviously, touch wood. But yeah, qualifying very good just for race. Just it kind of got away from him even before it started. So I don't think I can give him a higher grade than a 4 out of 10.
Jack Doohan now, he qualified in 14th and did not finish. Obviously, caused the safety car on lap one. What an error to make. I think up to then, his performance was actually very, very good. And if he just finished sort of like 11th, 12th, even 12th just ahead of the two Haas, he probably would have got something like a 6 or a 7. But a big error, sorry, a small error had a big impact with the disruptions to the car and putting it in the wall. I think he could have even qualified better had he had his lap in Q2 not been impeded by that Hamilton error. But as it is, I can't give him anything else than a 4 out of 10, and that's just sort of taken into account the fact that he is a rookie.
Yeah, again, I agree with you. I've also gone with a 4 out of 10 for Jack Doohan. And I don't think I can add more really onto what you've said. Obviously, caused the safety car on lap one, with him binning it. And yet again, it's another rookie falling foul to the weather conditions, and I think we won't be tired of saying this because these guys are rookies for the full season. So I think the word rookie will be used a lot this season on the Grid podcast. And I'm gonna I'm gonna end off with a sentence. He's a rookie. We can't expect much more. Obviously, what happened happened. But he's obviously going to hopefully learn from his mistakes, and kind of be aware of what to do, of what not to do, when in wet weather conditions. But yeah, it's a 4 out of 10. It can't be much more than that.
And then finally, Isaac Hadjar qualified 11th, but obviously had a very disappointing crash on the formation lap. I've gone as well for a 3 out of 10. Yeah, I don't want to be too harsh on him because he was very, very, very struck up about it. It's an easy mistake to make. You saw much more experienced drivers make the same mistake in similar safety car-like conditions. So he's just unlucky, really, isn't he? So it's a 3 out of 10.
And for Isaac Hadjar, I've gone with a 4 out of 10. You mentioned actually more experienced drivers making mistakes of that. Can you remember the last driver that made a mistake like that?
Well, Lawson made the exact same error, didn't he?
Well, you think about it, but I don't think you can class him as a more experienced. Let's think
But
more
as in
experienced.
the crash was exactly the same both between Hajar and Lawson.
Yeah, but I'm on about you're saying that more experienced drivers make mistakes like this. Let's not think about Liam Lawson. Think outside the box. Which driver has had an oopsie in recent times? Come on, think.
I hope you're not going to say who I think you're going to say.
What, Lance Stroll?
There we go. Yeah.
Think about it. I think Lance Stroll was sort of the driver that was on in my head. I don't think Liam Lawson was in my head. Obviously, the crash was pretty much the same, but the nature of the incident being on the formation lap, Lance Stroll pretty much did the exact same. But he had a good race in Australia. Let's stop slandering him. Hadjar obviously very distraught from what happened. Um, but the thing that struck me very hard was how Marco calling him very childish, and kind of it just bamboozles me. It's his debut race helmet. Think about it. I think anybody would be distraught of going into your debut race in Formula One and been in it before you even get going. I think anybody would get distraught. And what Anthony Hamilton did and kind of brought him in and kind of had a chat to him regarding it, I think is what any driver would have needed. Kind of a father figure to be there, and to kind of have a word with you, give you a piece of advice of what to do next. But yeah, it's a 4 out of 10 for Isaac Hadjar. Very unfortunate for him. We saw how distraught he was after he climbed out and was walking in the paddock. But once again, I'm going to mention it for the numerous driver that I've said it. The only way is up. He's a rookie, and I'm sure he'll bounce back from it.
And that concludes our 1 to 10 driver ratings. Next up, we will be looking at our Australian Grand Prix predictions and making our Chinese Grand Prix predictions. So, do you want to kick things off and give me your 2-star predictions and how you got on?
I sort of don't want to, because it was tragic. So my star predictions were rookie points and red flag, but I stated rookie points as a driver outside of Antonelli and Lawson. And I did, and obviously I revisited this, and I was like, do I sort of cheat it? Do I sort of cheat the system? But I put a big, massive X next to it. I'm going to stick with what I said, and I said a red flag, and there could have been a red flag, but the FIA decided to screw me over and just bring out the safety car. So it's nil poir for me.
I am surprised there wasn't a red flag for that Alonso crash because it was right on the racing line in a very, very tight part of the track. So I will say that. I had safety car, so that was done instantly. I also had Pierre Gasly points, and obviously, if he didn't make that stupid error, he more than likely would have got points. So that's disappointing. And then on to the qualifying predictions. I had Norris, Leclerc, Verstappen, Piastri, Hamilton. So I'll take 2 out of 5 for that. And then for the race, I had Norris, Leclerc, Hamilton, Piastri, Verstappen. So I've got 1 out of 5 for that one. So I got 3 out of 10 or 4 out of 12 overall. So not a bad start to the season, but there's room for improvement.
Wow, you can take the opening round of the season in predictions, because I only got 1 out of 12, and that's from Norris qualifying on pole. So in qualifying, I had Norris, Leclerc, Hamilton, Piastri, Verstappen, and I had sort of 3 of the 5 drivers there, but in the wrong place. And in the race, I had Leclerc, Hamilton, Norris, Piastri, and Russell. So I had 2 of the 5 drivers there, but obviously in the wrong place. Um, so yeah, happy for you to sort of take the opening round. And I'm gonna say it again. Only way is up for me. Only way is up.
And then let's look ahead to China. So obviously this is sprint weekend as well this weekend. So do you want to kick things off with your 2-star predictions, or do you need to write down your sprint race predictions?
No, you know what? I actually did my notes yesterday. Don't you worry, don't you worry. I came prepared. So for China, I've gone with a McLaren clean sweep. So McLaren clean sweep is sprint race, sprint shootout pole, sprint victory, qualifying pole, and race victory. I've got McLaren doing the clean sweep. I think they are the team to beat, and unfortunately, I think we are going to be experiencing some domination in China. But I've also gone for a Leclerc podium in the race. I think that he's going to come back with a bit of a vengeance, and I think that he will perform wonders in China. Well, I'm hoping he'll perform wonders. Whether he'll perform wonders, I don't know. I'm not Mystic Mac. But I'm hoping he will perform some wonders.
My two side predictions are a rookie beats their teammate. So that's in the main race, I will add, not the sprint race. And then I've gone for a Ferrari podium as well. I think they maybe a little bit underestimated after a poor showing in Australia, but I think they'll bounce back and get a podium in one of the two races. So I'll start and have a look at my sprint predictions. So in sprint qualifying, I've gone Piastri, Verstappen, Norris, Kimi Antonelli, and George Russell as my top five. And then for the sprint race, I've gone Norris, Piastri, Verstappen, Russell, Antonelli.
Wow. Okay, Antonelli's in the top five. I mean, I wouldn't expect that after his poor qualifying showing in Australia. Um, for my sprint, I've gone a little bit different to you. I've gone with opposite drivers from McLaren on pole. So I've gone Norris, Verstappen, Piastri as my top three. I've gone with George Russell in fourth, and I've gone with Charles Leclerc in fifth. For the sprint, I've gone with Piastri winning the race, with Norris in second and George Russell making it up to third, with Verstappen in fourth and Hamilton making it past his teammate to get fifth.
And then for the race itself, I've gone for Norris in qualifying. I've gone Norris, Piastri, Verstappen, Leclerc, and Russell. And then the race, I've gone Norris, Piastri, Verstappen, Russell, Leclerc. So I've not put a Ferrari podium in my actual predictions. I'm sort of hedging my bets, splitting the eggs between different baskets, not putting them all in one. But I think so. Yeah, I think it'll be back-to-back Norris wins.
And I'm inclined to agree with you regarding back-to-back Norris wins. So for qualifying, I've gone with Norris, Leclerc, Piastri, Verstappen, and Russell. And for the race, I've gone with Norris, Piastri, Leclerc, Russell, and Verstappen in fifth. So I've very firmly gone with all eggs in one basket. I've gone with Leclerc podium, and also in my predictions in the race, I've gone with a Leclerc third place. So all eggs are firmly placed in the Ferrari basket, and I'm hoping for them to deliver.
We'll see how those predictions get on in the coming days. Thank you all for listening to this episode of On the Grid Podcast. It's nice to be doing these race reviews once again. Thank you all for listening. Send us your predictions in the comments, and we will see you in the next episode looking ahead to China. Thank you for listening.
You mean looking back at China?
You know what I mean?